You're listening to the Things About Nature podcast. Coming to you from a city that never sleeps is me, your host, Rockshana. I invite you to join me in truly honest, passionate, and fun talks that motivate, invigorate, and maybe inspire. Even though we're no longer in the mile high, the sky is still the limit. Everything and anything goes. So let's start talking about things of that nature. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Things That Nature podcast. I'm your host, Rockshana, and from this random trend of authors that we kind of got stuck into, we have someone a little bit different. I mean, maybe not an author today, but maybe tomorrow. You never really know. I don't know. But today we have Supatra. Oh, I said it wrong, didn't I?
It's okay. It's Supatra Tovar.
Supatra. Hi, Supatra. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thanks for coming on and chatting with us and seeing whatever happens. We'll just talk about unicorns the entire time. How about that?
That sounds great.
So I know your home state is Colorado, but where do you go?
I grew up in Boulder, so I was born and raised there, and really loved everything that was Colorado. I even went to the University of Colorado to get my degree, my undergrad degree in biology. So I am all about Colorado, although now I live in Los Angeles, so quite a bit different.
That is a difference from Colorado, Los Angeles. What did something happen that made you move, or what was the choice to go?
Well, it was really just to kind of, feeling like I'd experienced everything that I wanted to experience out of Colorado and just wanting to broaden horizons and, live in a big city. So I moved to Los Angeles, and that's where I really kind of started my whole career. I started out in the fitness industry as a Pilates instructor. So I was doing that for a long time, which I don't know if you're familiar with Pilates at all, especially if you do like individual sessions, but it's almost as if you're having your own therapy session. And I started to feel like a therapist and became, really inspired to expand into all things health. So then I went on to study nutritional science at Cal State LA and got my master's in nutritional science and became a registered dietitian. And then went even further with that, really wanting to round out my knowledge and to be able to practice holistic health psychology. I went on to get a doctorate in clinical psychology.
Ooh, doctor in the house. Hey.
Thank you.
Now, what is your favorite thing to do as in your role as a doctor? Like, what is your most favorite thing that you're like, oh, yeah, this felt great?
Well, I think what really inspired me all the way through, especially when I was starting out in the fitness industry, was to help people with disordered eating or eating disorders. Now, disordered eating is really just kind of any eating that is out of the typical or the norm. And, to be quite honest, that's pretty much almost everybody, especially because we're so inundated in society with diet culture. So everybody has kind of a skewed way of looking at foods and interesting eating habits. And I started to really notice that even before I got into the fitness industry. I've very, very dear friend to me developed an eating disorder, and it was really difficult to try to be there for her and not know what to do, not to know how to help her, not know how to even get her proper help. And so that early influence, plus what I would see, as a Pilates instructor all the way through, being a dietitian, especially, but well into my clinical psychology doctorate, I really became passionate about helping people develop a healthy relationship to their bodies, to food. And so that's a big part of my practice. I also treat a variety of other things, like, I specialize in trauma, depression, and anxiety, but I really do treat the gamut. Most of it is with eating disorders or disordered eating.
Okay. What are some of the that you found are like the biggest misconceptions about eating disorders?
Well, I think, it's definitely conceived of as like a, Caucasian female, young 20s kind of disorder. I think that really the press is centered around, people of that demographic suffering from anorexia nervosa, but it's really across all cultures, races, ethnicities. How we develop our relationship to food goes all the way back to our earliest influences, and you can see in all demographics how we've developed disordered eating patterns, how we might become emotional eaters, how we might even develop more serious disorders like binge eating disorder, which is actually something that's not talked about nearly as much or given as much press as anorexia nervosa. But we also see, even kind of more hidden eating disorders such as orthorexia nervosa, which is not even a classically, defined eating disorder out of the DSM, the diagnostic manual that clinicians use. It's actually a relatively new eating disorder that has yet to have a classification. And what that is kind of a preoccupation with healthy foods or clean or safe foods to the point that it causes, distress and impairment in your lives. So there's a gamut of, different types of eating disorders that are not really, covered in the news, as well as some of these more hidden eating disorders.
Wow. I did not know that. You just taught me something new, and I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, well, because it is relatively new, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done, and a lot of, kind of pushing to have it be put into the DSM. But it's actually one of the most common disordered eating patterns that I will see in my practice in Los Angeles, especially. But this is really, nationwide. We have such a strong focus on eating clean, eating healthy, how to count your macros, and just this hyper focus on what is quote healthy for us, so that especially in a place like Los Angeles, you're just inundated with that. And so people tend to just sort of fall into these eating patterns, and it doesn't necessarily become a problem until it really affects how they're functioning in their daily lives. Like, can they go to a restaurant? Is there something clean enough for them to eat? So that's what I'm seeing a lot of, especially in Los Angeles.
Hmm. Look at that. That's a new one.
Yeah,
That's a new one.
yeah.
So when you see a new eating trend come along or a new eating diet, do you just kind of cringe?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I am categorically anti-diet. There's so many reasons why diets don't work, from the psychological all the way down to the physiological. Our bodies are themselves are not designed to be, starved or have, massive restrictions. So when we go on a restrictive diet, just in our bodies fight back and resist all attempts at starving. So even though you may be on this diet, you may be losing weight for a while, the moment you get off the diet, or it might even happen as you're dieting, your body fights back. It goes through this process called compensatory hyperphagia, which just means to make up for is compensatory, and hyperphagia just means eat a lot. So you just tend to eat a lot when you get off your diet, and sometimes it's not even a conscious thing. And your body also remembers the proportion of fat and muscle that you lost during your diet, and will most often regain that amount in the same proportion, if not more, than what you lost during your diet. So dieting is just a monumental waste of time. It doesn't last. And psychologically, you go through so much when you deprive yourself. Create psychological cravings along with physiological cravings. So it's just a dead end street, in my opinion. So I really try to counsel people to have a better relationship, not only to food, but also to themselves, and take them through how they can deprogram themselves out of diet culture and tune into their bodies, their hunger, their fullness, and really listening in to what their bodies need. It's not necessarily easy. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. However, once people do realize that there is a way out of dieting, it is a freedom like they've never known. And it's so wonderful to see clients actually shedding off diet culture and all of its influences and learning how to tune into themselves.
Ooh,
Hmm.
I feel like that's a trigger. I mean, there's so many people that's like, I dieted, I
Hmm.
lost weight, I
Hmm.
worked out, I look good, I'm gonna keep this going.
Hmm.
But also, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I know so many people have diet and then after it's like, oh, well, that was when I was on my diet.
Exactly. And usually it's just about depriving yourself either of, a certain kind of food or an entire food group. I mean, really, it's all lately just been about how carbs are the enemy, which is just really misleading and actually ultimately not good for you, especially if you are continuously depriving yourselves of carbohydrates, like, say, in the keto diet. You're putting yourself into a metabolically acidic state most of the time because you're only really consuming fat and protein. And you're depriving your most important organ, your brain, of the fuel that it needs the most, which is glucose, which comes from carbohydrates. So, when I see that, when I see entire food groups entirely off the menu, I know that that's not going to last in the long run for anyone. It's just not sustainable. It's not even, a healthy way to live, but it's not especially a fun way to live. And I teach people that they can really live in a world where no food is off limits. It's a little scary when people, try to grasp that concept because they're told over and over and over again how they have to avoid all of these different foods. But if you actually let them be, available to you, you have no restriction on them, and you're really tuning in and listening to your body, you start to really want and crave foods that are good and healthy for you. So it's not like, opening up Pandora's box and all of a sudden you're just going to, have a sugar binge if you allow all foods. When you allow all foods, you get the choice to eat whatever you want. When you're listening to your body, you tend to eat, natural, whole, healthy foods, but you also can have a slice of cake. You can have chocolate. You can eat pasta. If you're really listening to your hunger and fullness, you'll never overeat.
Okay. Overeating, yeah, I have to say,
Mhm.
I'm a champ at that. Especially if it's so good.
Exactly. And usually if you're really overeating, it's about, oh, I don't normally get this food, so I am just going to get as much as I can right now. And when you don't have those, parameters, when you do allow all foods, you don't tend to have binges. You don't tend to have cravings for what you used to crave when they were off limits. It's really amazing once you start to go down this path.
So how do you bite your tongue when your girlfriends or family members like, ooh, I'm on this diet, or I don't eat carbs this week?
I kind of don't. I can have a mouth. I will admit that. No, I don't tend to, with my friends and my family, I don't tend to, dole out advice.